So what else is in there that you'll see? There's lots of other various statistics, but there's a few things that tell you about what the best practices, what the trailblazers are. And the three key things that I want to pick out here are the following. From a trailblazer point of view, as you can see, embedding the responsibility of BC throughout the organisation. Because of your job roles, you probably know this, right? I still find it surprising how hard it is sometimes to get this up through the chain, particularly in these days, right? Business continuity. One customer who had a disaster, and next year when they did the plan, he said, you know what, this was a person who was affected by multiple sites in the US, he was affected by an earthquake, and they sat there and they said, right, we had a disaster this year, chances of having another disaster pretty remote, let's cut the business continuity budget. Luckily, they decided not to. They then had a fire that year. They suffered 3 disasters in 3 years, earthquake, fire and flood in different locations. Now, would you ever consider cutting your insurance payments? No. What does insurance give you? It pays you a lot of money, makes you feel really good about yourself. What does it do for your customers? Absolutely nothing. If you suffered a real disaster without a business continuity plan, you might get some insurance and money, but you'll have no customers. If you invest in a business continuity plan, you'll keep your customers, you'll keep your stock up, you'll keep your shareholders happy in the longer term. I'd cut insurance payments before I cut business continuity planning. What does the bank, who in London average 2 million cash in a bank branch, who spend about £250,000 on a vault, so that's just over 10%. Yet the amount of money in the accounts that go through that branch is probably in excess of £1 billion and spend next to nothing on protecting that data. You can replace the money, you can't replace the data if you lose it. Business continuity is very, very valuable from a point of view of protecting data and information to be able to keep you going in business throughout the supply chain. Embedded. Retrofitting business continuity costs a lot more money than putting it in your process at the start. Should be embedded throughout your procurement. Every time somebody signs off a PO for something, they should say, what's the business continuity plan? If I'm buying a PC, that must be using some information that person needs to access to. What's the plan behind this? What's the plan for this system? That should be embedded in, it's cheaper. Recovery plans must be kept simple and stupid. At a time of stress, people's reading levels decline. You must make sure your plan is built in such a way that it can be read by somebody off the street. In the managed recovery program that we put forward, that's what we do. We build plans that we can run for your business, that we can do your recovery plan, that we can do your invocation to a certain point. So it has to be written in that language. We need to make sure that's done. And most trailblazers use a range of options. There is not one size fits all. You'd be surprised how often when we go in and do impact analysis of people who've already got plans in place, we find that they're spending too much money in the wrong place. Because they've just done a blanket approach without honing in on what it is they really require. Under-investing in some places, over-investing in other places. And my final thought on supply chain really goes back to what happened in Japan, which also touched on. One of the issues that seemed to exacerbate the supply chain disruption was partly down to perceived best practice in Japan, which is setting up close to your customers. Common practice over there. That gives you, even though you might have multiple suppliers, if they're all together, you've got a problem. Of course, we don't have that in the UK. Or do we? Any of you saw F. Davis's programme over the summer, or read his book, he talks about Silicon Fen and Silicon Gem because people like to be there. It's the coffee shop syndrome. You open one Starbucks up, another one opens 2 doors left, and a Costa, and then whatever. Because people like to congregate together. Like minds, need to consider that. 2 last thoughts on buzzwords at this moment in time, but then you can't ignore these. Social media, right? Risks and benefits. Social media, you cannot ignore this. There's some people who think, yeah, just leave it. You can't, because it's happening. Your staff are doing this, your suppliers, your customers are doing it, right? And it's very powerful. Or let's go to that new restaurant. Let's have a look at the reviews, right? That's what people do. You need to scan your horizon, and you need to be ahead of the game. You need to acknowledge that it's there. You've got to assume whatever you say in private becomes public. If the problem is unstoppable, you have to have a strategy in place. Business continuity plans have traditionally always had some form of PR plan in their risk, so you go out and talk. You need to make sure that takes into account social media. I don't think any of us heard of Twitter until that plane landed on the Hudson, and there was that image of the plane landing, which was sent out by Twitter. tweet, whatever, right? Tweet, Yammer, there's so many other damn things, can't keep up with. But the point is, it is, even social media in the past would have been contained in the newspapers. Well, we know what happened to Ratner, right? And his comment about prawn sandwiches and earrings, right? And then I think the biggest disaster, and this go on the internet and it still gets you. Tony Hayward, right? I want to get my life back. What a disaster. He probably didn't mean it in the way he said it, but that was just sent viral across the world. We need to make sure we do that. Yeah, you have to think what it would be like if your response was then viewed through a committee or a public inquiry. If you mess up, it could be damaging to your company, it could be career threatening to yourself. Cloud. Again, virtualization has been around for many years. Cloud is just to me it's just a name, it would be another buzzword in there. But when you're talking to your suppliers, again, going through the supply chain, is if they're using cloud, you need to be asking more questions. Where is the information? Right? It's surprising. People talk about, I need cloud to be secure. I'm very worried about it. I would say, how many is in LinkedIn here? Right, so that's personal data. Where's it stored? Where's your personal data that you put in LinkedIn? Physically, where is it? Any ideas?
Cloud.
Where?
Cloud.
Cloud, yeah, where? What country? This country? Another country? I don't know where it is. I'm going to be honest. If you said US, I'd say okay. So people put information out there into the cloud, right? We want it to be secure. They don't know where it is. We offer cloud services. We offer cloud services that give the customer the ability to take cloud services that are replicated, right? A lot of our customers do not take that option. You as a supplier, when you're talking to suppliers, customers talking to suppliers, need to know that. Where is the information? I'm running this in the cloud. Okay, where is it? How does it affect my supply? How quickly can you recover it? Right? Is that cloud provider compliant? If that is data that is restricted and you don't know where it is, physically in which country, it might be going somewhere where you don't want it to go, or where you shouldn't be allowing it to go. So it brings a whole different ballgame to business impact analysis and business planning. A supplier who uses that kind of capability. And don't get me wrong, they should use it. It's a very effective methodology for reducing costs down, but you need to go into it with your eyes wide open. If you look at the risk for 2012, there are a number of things that are going to be happening all in 1 year. Right? On the news last night, you would have heard about the fact that there's going to be potentially lots of strikes this year. Those are likely to carry on to next year. You've got the Queen's Jubilee coming up next year. You have got the Olympics. I know we've got a talk coming up later on, but the ODA are a customer of theirs, so we've been very fortunate. We've actually been able to visit the site and see how it's going up, and it's fantastic. Right? But as was stated earlier on, during the course of the Olympics, there will be 800,000 extra people in London. 800,000 each day. Right? 500,000 of those were spectators, 200,000 workforce, and 100,000 volunteers each day. That's going to cause significant problems. So therefore we can plan for that. They're also locking down all the comms lines, so if you've got any requirements for comms, you better make sure they're in place well ahead, because if they're going to transverse across anywhere to do with any of the places where the Olympics are being held, then you're going to have a problem. During the test events, one of our centres was close to one of the test events, and they closed off the road just for the test event. That caused major problems. You need to be looking at that from that perspective. And if you intend to do something about it, we're already seeing a peak in people testing towards the end of this year and early next year as they test ready ahead of the Olympics. While procurement can take such a long time, we need to be thinking about this. So, in summary, I understand, you need to understand, first of all, with less staff, more people become critical. You can see the risks that there are to office locations, you can see the risks there are to your supply chain. At the end of the day, recovery has to work for your business. That's to work for your customers ultimately, but that is what benefits your business from. You have to have this end-to-end recovery. If you miss anything else, usually what people miss out is actually something like voice. They don't think they think about getting people connected to the data quite a lot. They don't think about the voice. Voice is very important. Right? During a disaster, the number of voice calls goes up to a company. Particularly, again, you can kind of understand this. Sorry to keep coming back to Buncefield. When that happened, right, Northgate got tremendous more calls from their customers literally saying, are you all right? They had people calling who were friends and relatives, are you all right? As a result of that, one thing that the business continuity managers in Northgate had to do is they now carry 2 phones. One is the one that only business continuity people can phone up because they couldn't get through, because they were being inundated with messages. We have to exploit virtualization, that's coming around, leverage costs. BIA is something that should be done on a constant basis, you know this, and teach you gigs. Okay, guiding principles. You can actually these days mitigate for most known disasters and disruptions. Recovery performance, it's much closer to business as usual. As say, we're going to be down for a couple of hours, we can invite, we'll keep going. We have to look at it to address the mobile workforce, because they're an important part of what we do, creating that seamless part between the physical and the virtual, making sure everything's resilient, keeping those instructions on what to do simple, easy to use, making sure recovery is convenient, sustainable. Service providers like us will collaborate if necessary to fill the gaps, and having the right tools. So to say, keep it simple, use the software tools that we're showing and other people are showing here in order to be able to make those changes quickly. Doing all this, then you should be ahead of the race for 2012, right? And I do believe if you get it right, you can definitely beat the competition. Get your suppliers together, you'll be that far ahead of your competition. Thank you very much.
SunGard obviously is a critical supplier for many businesses.
Yeah.
What sort of experience have you had? What sorts of queries do you get from customers actually coming to you, asking for reassurance?
We get the obvious one, which is what's your business continuity plans, right? And we are BS 2599 registered, so they want to do that. We do get queries about what's the plans for if you have an incident in one of the recovery centres. So again, being the age I am, when we only had one recovery centre, it was kind of like we've got one recovery centre, right? Now, because we're multiple, in our business, size matters. So the fact that if we have a multiple implication, or if we have an event that affects us, we can move to one of our other centres, means that we can provide that kind of level of service. Right, so that's the kind of thing we tend to get. We also get people want to know what best practice is, because we have, as you saw there, an average of 1 incident every week, right? And that's just in the UK, let alone what we get around the States and there. And we bring that to bear through our consultants to say, okay, this is best practice for your industry, or this is best practice in these. And certainly what we would have learned over the years is no disasters are ever the same, right? You do have to have a plan that covers the worst disaster. But I honestly believe is what happens is when a disaster is, you take the plan, you start working to it, but whatever the incident is, you use your knowledge and your experts to say, okay, we can change the plan because this has happened. So again, flood in Chicago, where this is a good one, where they were putting in a new bridge in the river they drilled through, so the water went up through the old coal truck rails, which now had all the comms in. So people could see the water rising, right? So one particular customer, their plan was, okay, we'll evacuate, do the recovery there. They had time to actually take backups and physically remove stuff. Now the plan didn't say that, because you couldn't possibly write a plan that says in this instance do this. But they took advantage of that and said, okay, we'll bypass that part of the plan because it just speeds up the recovery. So that's the kind of experience you bring in. So people quite often ask us what our experience is in dealing with this. And also, what's our own recovery plan? So that tends to be it.
Are you seeing a lot more queries from customers?
We are, yeah. I am surprised to hear, talking outside, that there still seems to be a reluctance in pushing that through. This idea of, what's your business continuity plan? Do you conform to BS 25999? That sort of thing. We see that quite a lot. And security. Those are the two biggest issues.